Madam, you can share, madam. You can share that. Yes, madam. Share content.
Yeah, that's what I'm trying to do. But
No, in the desktop itself, you can share, of course. Open. You click that share option.
no, that is what when I click that, it is not showing my file at all. That is why I asked before also. You said I'll be able to share once.
You have PowerPoint.
Madam, please check, madam. You can share, madam. You can share the content. You can
One second.
Just click the top arrow mark, madam. Share content.
Yeah, that is what I have clicked. When I put open share tray, and it says loading.
Screen, madam. Click the screen.
Loading,
and then,
but after loading, it comes out actually. One second, let me see.
Okay, madam. Just see, madam.
It says it didn't upload. Second.
Try again once, madam. Share content. Click on the share content. Then you will see screen.
Yeah, that.
Yes, madam. Screen.
Yeah.
Click on the screen, madam. Then automatically it will come.
Yeah, but no, that is what it is. It keeps going, and then if I say browse also, upload from the computer, the file does not open then after that.
Okay, madam. Okay.
Madam, you convert that into PDF file.
Okay.
You convert that into PDF file. If the file is very large, then also it may be a problem. So when you open the tray, you will find the screen share desktop/window. No, you can click that.
One second.
From desktop itself, you can display.
That is what I was trying to do. It was not opening there.
Oh, in desktop, huh?
No, the file is open in desktop.
No, screen share you clicked or what?
Yes, screen share I clicked.
Then that entire screen you click it.
Yeah, one second. I'm just trying one. You asked me to convert it to PDF. I'm just doing it to PDF.
Yeah, sometimes it may not work. PowerPoint.
You are able to see now?
It takes some time, a few seconds. Just a minute.
Madam, any red color line came, madam, at the ending of your screen, throughout the screen?
One second.
Red color line will appear, madam, on your screen. Yeah.
One second. No, red color did not appear. No red color thing appeared.
Red color throughout the window, red color will appear, madam, if you share the screen.
It is not. Still not showing any this thing.
Otherwise, you can do one thing. Of course, you can send the PDF.
Okay.
So we can share from our tray.
Okay, 1 second.
Is it possible? Otherwise, you can get help from your colleagues there. Or nobody there. You are at home.
No, I'm at office only.
Okay. So I can get some students may know better.
Yeah, 1 second. I'll just see once again and then I'll. One second. I'll just send it to you.
To my mail ID or?
Yeah, to your mail ID.
Yeah, just madam, I'll check.
Yeah, 1 second. It says no, it is not possible. No, it is. One second. Hmm. It's saying they only support PowerPoint files. You wanted me to share with this thing, no?
Whichever it's possible, you can share.
No, but it is saying you cannot. It cannot be shared.
Okay.
Shall I connect again and see?
Yeah.
Maybe something.
Okay.
Yeah, okay.
Log out and again.
Take the see. Hey, that might be spread to each and every. Actually, we are staying in hostel. Madam, now it's came, madam. Fuel cells, materials and technology. Yeah,
It
yes,
has come.
madam.
No,
Yeah.
for me, I'm just waiting 1 second. It is not showing me this. Yeah, now it is showing. Okay.
Yes, madam. Yes, madam.
Okay. Can I start now?
Yes, madam. Yes, madam.
It is in full screen.
Yes, madam. Full screen only, madam. Yes, it is in full screen.
Good afternoon, everybody. At the outset, I would like to thank Professor Murugan for inviting me for delivering this lecture in the faculty development program. My name is Ramya. I'm a senior scientist with Center for Fuel Cell Technology. It is one of the centers of excellence with International Advanced Research Center for Powder Metallurgy and New Materials. I just want to give just a brief account of our center. It's an autonomous R&D institution under Department of Science and Technology. It has many centers of excellence, from engineering coatings to nanomaterials, ceramic processing, etc. Most of these centers are located at Hyderabad. The Center for Fuel Cell Technology and the Automotive Energy Research are located in Chennai. Okay, we basically do our R&D work and for both strategic and non-strategic sectors. Our motto is to translate the research into technology. So based on this, we have transferred about the ARCA has transferred about 17 technologies to various entrepreneurs. We also have an incubation center, and and we do joint research with both international and national partners. At the Center for Fuel Cell Technology, the research areas are hydrogen based actually. So we do fuel cell technology, mostly PM fuel cells. We used to do some direct methanol fuel cell work also. Currently, we are doing a lot of alkaline fuel cells, and we do have interest in regenerative fuel cells. Apart from that, hydrogen generation is a major program where we look at electrochemical hydrogen generation. Basically, that is with water electrolyzers. Then chemical hydrogen generation with sodium borohydrate. We have some interest in photo electrochemical route of hydrogen generation also. Apart from that, we also do. We had a project with MNRE on hydrogen storage, where we looked at many low temperature alloys, carbon nanomaterials, and other things for storing the hydrogen. And we have also done an integration with fuel cell to show with its usage with, where we can do an integrated system with storage and utilization. We also work on other energy conversion devices, basically supercapacitors, metal air batteries, and also program on redox batteries. By now you would have heard about fuel cell definition and all that, but I'll just take a small recap actually, so that we can proceed with whatever I'm going to say. And basically, fuel cells are an electrolytic cell in which the chemical materials, basically the reactants, hydrogen and air, are stored outside the cell. And when they are fed into the anode and the cathode of the cell, they react, convert this chemical energy into electrical energy. So the moment we say talk about a fuel cell or any energy device, the first thing that comes to our mind is a battery actually. So we have to know how it is different from a battery. Basically, because both convert chemical energy into electrical energy. And the major difference is that a battery has the chemicals stored within the battery actually, and it can be of two types: a primary battery, which is a one-time use battery, and a secondary battery, which is a reusable battery, which can be recharged actually, and it produces DC power. So if you look at the difference between battery and the fuel cell, basically in battery reactants are stored inside, whereas in fuel cell everything is stored outside. Okay, so as a result, the energy density becomes higher, and the battery has a self-discharge characteristics. Here, unless you give the reactants, there is no power produced actually. So there is no self-discharge, and a rechargeable battery needs a grid power to, or grid or some power to store the, to recharge the cells. Whereas here there is no such thing as recharging, and life cycle of a battery is limited. However, a fuel cell operates as long as you give the reactants. So how does it compare with all the other energy devices like capacitors and supercapacitors? These are all high power device. They have high power density actually. So they can give, for a short spurge of time, you can have very high power. Batteries have power density is low. However, you can work for a longer time. So energy density is higher in case of a battery. Fuel cell is also having very high energy density. It is much higher than batteries also. As a result, it can be operated for a long duration of time as long as you feed it with the reactants. So if you look at the carbon to hydrogen ratio also, among all the other fuels that we use, wood, coal, oil, natural gas, etc., because it is pure hydrogen, as a result, the carbon to hydrogen ratio is also, hydrogen, it is full hydrogen. So it is a very high energy dense device actually. So if the fuel cells are also divided into many types of fuel, many types actually based on their electrolyte. We have proton exchange membrane fuel cell, which uses a polymeric membrane for exchanging the ions. We have phosphoric acid fuel cell, where phosphoric acid acts as an electrolyte, a molten carbonate or a solid oxide. These are the other types of fuel cells. I will be talking mainly about polymer electrolyte membrane fuel cell. This has a this operates in the temperature of 50 to 80 degrees centigrade, and requires hydrogen, pure hydrogen, as we use, as it is a low temperature fuel cell, and it can be operated with methanol also. When it is operated with methanol, it is called direct methanol fuel cell. So what is the advantage of the fuels that PEMFC that I am talking about? So this is going to be high. It is a high power density material. You can get high power density. The membrane, which is like a polymeric sheet, acts as a separator also. It separates the two reactant gases, hydrogen and oxygen. And because it is modular in nature, they are easy to assemble. And it works in the ambient temperature. Pressure nowadays, cells are also operating at a high pressure. So it works in slightly higher pressure or at ambient pressure. And it is modular in nature. And there are minimal corrosion problems. And it is ideally suited for electric vehicle. Being a low temperature fuel cell, it can easily be started. So it can be, it is ideal for electric vehicles. So a quick look at the principle of operation. Where you, in the anode, you feed hydrogen gas that in the presence of catalyst forms protons and electrons. The electrons move through the external circuit, and where oxygen and proton react to give water. So the proton has to move within the membrane actually. So overall reaction, if it is, it is only product water formation. As a result, it is considered a very clean energy. So look at the materials that are required to make this kind of a fuel cell. So the major material components are a membrane, like I showed you. You need a catalyst to split hydrogen to make oxygen react with proton. And then you need some kind of a flow field actually. So you have to pass these gas across the electrode. So you need a flow field plate or a bipolar plate. and you need the rest of the cells, rest of the paraphernalia for making a cell, that is a current collector, an end plate, and a clamping mechanism so that the gas does not leak. So what do you do when the catalyst, how do you spray the catalyst? On what do you spray the catalyst, or how do you make the electrode? So that whole process is known as the either a membrane electrode assembly, or two electrodes are sandwiched with the membrane to form a membrane electrode assembly. So to ensure that the gas flows fully into the electrode, you have to spray what is called a gas diffusion layer. So if you look at the major research areas in PEMFC, what is the driving factor for this research? Either it is the cost, where you want to bring down the cost, or you want to improve the technology. So if you look at the major cost components, the major cost components are catalyst, bipolar plate, membrane. So all the other things are minor things compared to the catalyst and bipolar plates, membrane. So they are all clubbed as others, current collectors. There is not much research going on in the end plate current collectors and all that. Major work is on the catalysts and bipolar plates and membrane. Sorry. Are you able to see my slide?
Yes, madam. Yes, madam. PT blacks versus catalyst.
Okay. For a minute, it didn't show it to me, so that is the reason why. Okay, so if we look at the catalyst portion, what are the material challenges there? So PEMFC uses. Hello.
Yes, ma'am.
You can see. I don't know.
Yes, madam. We are able to see your slide. Slide number 14.
Okay, no, I'm okay. Okay, fine. So, what are the catalyst material challenges? So, basically, what we use is noble metal catalyst. Platinum is mainly used as a catalyst. So, this can be used as such, like platinum black, which is not supported on anything, or you can have platinum supported catalyst, actually supported on carbon. So these platinum supported on carbon are basically in the 2 to 4 nanometer range, whereas the platinum black catalysts are slightly larger sized particles. So, and the research driving factors basically are the cost. You want to reduce the amount of platinum. So this can be achieved either by particle size reduction, or you improve upon the catalyst dispersion. The other way to reduce the cost could be that you can use a non-noble metal catalyst. It's totally go away from that. However, although it looks very promising, those catalysts are not currently very high, have very high durability. As a result, we are still stuck with the platinum group material catalysts. So the other thing is, what we have to look at is durability. So what are the factors that lead to the failure of the catalyst? That is, whether platinum particle agglomeration can take place, or coarsening of the particles takes place. The catalyst support can degrade, as a result of which the whole catalyst fails. So this issue of support degradation takes place mainly in the carbon support that is used, when the potential used is higher, actually. So we can go over to non-supported carbon, or we can still stick with the pure platinum based catalyst and do modifications in such a way that you have to use very less and you get very good capacity. So what are the unsupported? Like I said, the first one is the platinum unsupported, pure platinum catalyst. What you can do tailor new nanostructures, basically, with high surface area, so that you can increase the catalyst utilization. And although the particle size might not decrease, however, utilization will increase. But what is the major advantage with a non-supported catalyst is that the catalyst layer is thinner. As a result, the ohmic drop is very less, and so it can be low. Even with very low loading, you can get good performance. And thinner layer also facilitates easy migration of the reactant species into the active sites. So if we look at the various materials, way by which you can prepare these platinum catalysts, the first thing would be to reduce take a platinum salt, use a reducing agent so that you get metallic particles. So you can use reducing agents like borohydride or hydrogen, etc. We can do that. There is also, you can also form colloidal particles with a method called polyol method. And here you will get particle size much smaller than the earlier one. Then you can also do, if you have a suitable organometallic precursor, you can do thermal decomposition and to form the reduced, platinum particles actually. The other methods is nowadays they are using an organic capping agent actually. So what happens is the particle distance between one platinum and another platinum particle increases. As a result, you get very narrow particle size distribution, and size of the particle also reduces. Apart from this, you can also do platinum nanowires or nanocubes. We can think of various methods of making these catalysts. The picture that I have given here shows that of platinum octahedron and and how we can see that even with a lower loading compared to platinum on carbon, how the specific activity is higher for the same mass activity. So we can think of various methods by which we can make this platinum. Yet another method would be you can form nanospheres, nanosheets. The figure that is there here, it shows that compared to platinum nanosheets or platinum black, how the current density performance is much higher with respect to platinum nanosphere. You can also form platinum-based dendrites, or the various methods that are used are either template-assisted synthesis, where you have a hard template and then you form the catalyst either with mesoporous silica or carbon nanotube, and then try to remove that template. So you use a hard template method, or you can also use a soft template method, where you can use a liquid crystals or form a micelle or a reverse micelle micro emulsions, and then these can be used to assist in formation of the platinum particle. Apart from this, you can also do an electrochemical de-alloying, where you have a copper platinum alloy or something, and then you try to etch away your copper, so that you are left with platinum particles. This kind of a structure gives a kind of a porous structure of platinum is formed, which is very good for catalysis. So, like I said, carbon as a support has a problem of degradation. So what happens? It can lead to corrosion. Corrosion occurs, and it leads to accelerated loss of active surface area. And what basically happens is that pore morphology of the electrode changes. As a result, degradation, catalyst particles get removed from the carbon support, and so the potentials increase, the performance decreases. So what we can do is use a non-carbon support, and the most common non-carbon supports are the metal oxides and conducting polymers, etc. This figure here I have shown is the use of graphene, nitrogen doped graphene, which has been prepared with ammonia and melamine, and then they have incorporated platinum with by ethylene glycol reduction method, and they have found that this compared to the commercial platinum on carbon, so this method produces a higher current density and also a more stable catalyst is formed. Basically, a mixture of both multi-walled carbon nanotubes and also a nitrogen doped graphene has been used so that the contact is improved actually. So the other non-carbon support that you can think of is on the gas diffusion layer itself or on the electrode itself. What they have done, they have grown tungsten oxide, and on the tungsten oxide they have formed platinum catalyst. As a result, what they have found is even with a low loading of platinum and higher performance is obtained. So some of the other things that we can use are the conducting oxides, basically suboxides of titanium, titanium oxide, iridium tin oxides and all. These can be used because they have high conductivity. However, what has been found is these some of the suboxides like this Ti4O7 and all, they loses their electrical conductivity in the fuel cell environment where oxygen is present actually. So under those circumstances, a doped titania is preferred. One such example is the niobium doped titania structure, and this catalyst has been found to have even better performance than the Johnson and Matthey's high spec catalyst that is available. The other support that can be used is conducting polymers. Polypyrrole has been widely used as a support, and even this catalyst has also been found to have better performance compared to the commercial catalyst. However, the current density and all, it depends on the amount of platinum that is loaded in the catalyst. Apart from all these things, we can also think of a metal-free catalyst. Like I said, we can go over to totally a metal-free environment where they have used modified graphene oxides itself, sulfur, nitrogen, fluorine doped graphene oxides itself, and performance of this is shown in the side actually, where although these catalysts perform better in alkaline fuel cells and alkaline environment than in case of acidic environment, and the performance is much lower than the platinum-based catalyst. So a lot of experiments are being research is being carried out in improving the performance. So apart from this, you can also have a mixture actually where you have a carbon black, CNT, all a mixture of all these things, and how you process the material to have high surface area platinum. That forms a major research, and such type of catalyst has been known to give very good current density. One of the other transition metal based catalyst that is being highly researched nowadays is the FENC catalyst, where with high loading they have found that it is quite stable for some 100 hours of operation and all, and it gives some stable performance at 0.5 volts, at about 200-300 milliamps current density they are able to achieve actually. So how do we characterize all these catalysts? What tests can we do to characterize these? Basically, you can do a cyclic voltammetry, which tells you about the we can get what is known as the electrochemical surface area, which gives you the catalyst activity, indirectly gives you catalytic activity. you can perform linear sweep voltammetry experiments where you can directly compare the performance of one catalyst from the onset of oxidation. You can from the current density that is obtained, and also you can calculate the number of electrons that are taking part in the reaction. All these things determine how effective our catalyst is. We can also do an impedance spectroscopy, which tells you how active the catalyst is, whether there are any other resistances that are building into the system which is impeding the performance. Or we can do corrosion tests to see whether the catalyst, especially this is especially true when you are looking at the carbon, or you are looking at the transition metal based catalyst, where it will not work for, at a later stage in the fuel cell environment. Basically, you can what are the things you can study? You can study the catalyst itself, effectiveness of the catalyst. You can study the effects of the binding agent. You can study the effect of co-cation. Sometimes if you have a alloy catalyst, the cation might one of the cation might come out of the system. Or you can do an impurity study. You can study, you can see whether what are the impurities that can affect your catalyst, poisoning. You can study all these things with respect to the catalyst. You can study the kinetics, all transportation, everything. All these properties can be studied using the electrochemical techniques. So now what you basically look at is a polarization curve, which is a current versus voltage curve. And although the reversible potential is 1.23 volts, you will always have the curve starting around 1 volt because of what is known as the activation losses. That is the energy barrier that is associated with the catalyst reaction. Then apart from that, you have ohmic losses, because these are due to the resistances of the electrodes, electrolyte, current collector, all the interconnects and contact resistances. And you also have mass transport losses because of a limitation of the amount of gas that you can feed into the system. So let us move over to, we have looked at catalysts now extensively, platinum based catalysts and all the other catalysts. The next important material is the polymer electrolyte membrane. Basically, what kind of material is it? They are only ionic polymers with very high conductivity. So what is the main characteristic that is required is high conductivity. And because it has to act as a barrier between the two gases, so there should be no mixing of the gases. For that, it has to be having high mechanical strength, because each of the membrane has to withstand the pressure of the gases, and it should be both thermally and chemically stable. Okay, so apart from this, you have also need certain properties, like you should be able to make a membrane electrode assembly with that, and it should have favorable interaction with water. That is, once product water is formed, it should not lose all its strength and stability actually. So all these things, it has to be seen while designing the membrane. So if we look at the various available membranes, or the membranes that have been studied, these are basically perfluorosulfonic acid based membranes, or many kind of hydrocarbons have been modified actually. Commercial or otherwise synthesized polymers, what they do is carry out sulfonation processes which can induce proton conductivity. So most of the literature work will be based on perfluorosulfonic acid based membrane. One of the major commercial membrane is the Nafion membrane. And one thing that you will see everywhere is the cost of this membrane. This cost of this membrane is very high, yes, because if you look at the reactions that have been it goes through a number of steps actually. There are about 7 steps in forming the membrane. So as a result, it ends up being a very high, costly material. Apart from that, it is also an opportunity cost when they have developed the material, and so as a result, it is a monopoly kind of a thing. But there are many other substitutes with smaller side chains, and varying side chains are available. with varying costs actually. But most of the membrane cost is membrane is based on perfluorosulfonic acid based materials. Apart from the cost of this material, it also has certain other shortcomings, like it is dependent on water for conduction, it has limited stability. So what can you do? You can look at aromatic other membranes that I had listed, or you can modify these membranes by incorporating, addressing each one of these problems. Like if water is the problem, you try to add hydrophilic agents within that and increase the conductivity. Or you don't want to have water as a medium to conduct the proton, then you use a phosphoric acid based membrane like polybenzimidazole, which does not use water for conductivity. Other than that, you can add hygroscopic agents like SiO2, TiO2, and all that, which can absorb water. However, it remains to be seen whether it transfers the water that it has absorbed to the membrane and enhances conductivity or not. And you also have to see whether these are good enough for high temperature application. So one of the what is the advantage if you go for a high temperature polymer electrolyte membrane? See, what has been found is that carbon monoxide, which is a major poison, if we operate the cell at higher temperatures, the tolerance to of platinum catalyst to carbon monoxide increases. So that is one of the major advantages you get. You can use a slightly non-pure gas, actually a reformer gas or something like that can be used, so that we can have a fuel cell which is not very expensive. Our operating cost is less, kind of a thing. So the electrochemical kinetics are also improved when you have a high temperature operation. The water management and cooling becomes easier, and waste heat can be recovered. You can have a higher delta T, as a result of which you can have a co-generated system which improves the performance. So what are basically these are either modified PFSAs, perfluorosulfonic acid membranes, which can be operated at higher temperature by incorporating all these hygroscopic materials, oxides and all. Or it can even be a polyaromatic membrane, which has higher stability. Okay, so that is another possibility. Or, like I said, the third one is the benzimidazole based membranes, where phosphoric acid becomes the medium of conduction of protons. So, if we look at this figure, you can see how the Nafion membrane loses its conductivity when the relative humidity or the water content is less in the membrane, actually. So if we look at that, the red line denotes the operation at 1% humidity, very low humidity, and as we increase the humidity, the performance increases. However, you can also see that if we have a composite membrane, where you have doped sulfonated zirconia in this case, actually, so you can see that the performance improves beyond whatever can be possible for a humidified condition also. Apart from this, why do we look at hydrocarbon based membranes? Basically, these are already commercial membranes, so you can modify them and make PEM membranes, and which can be used for fuel cell application, and they can also be recycled, and some of them have very high decomposition temperature because of the rigid backbone structure and all that. So compared to Nafia. So, however, because they are also sulfonated membranes, they are vulnerable to loss of conductivity upon loss of water. So one of the main membrane that I said you can use is the benzimidazole based membrane. This is the structure of benzimidazole. The nitrogen can coordinate with the phosphoric acid. As a result, a conducting polymer electrolyte membrane is formed actually. So because of its high thermal stability and higher doping of phosphoric acid, these membranes are
Excuse me,
quite.
madam.
Yes, sir.
Madam, some participants are raising their hands for doubt. You can tell them. You can tell them that you will clear the doubts. You will answer to the queries at the end of the session. Some people they are raising hands.
I'm unable to see here. Okay, so in case anybody has any question,
they lowered their hands. You can you can answer to the queries at the end. You can tell them.
Okay. If anybody has any queries, please we can discuss them towards the end actually, so that I can finish my presentation. That we will be able to cover the whole topic.
Yeah, that's fine.
Yeah. So this phosphoric acid, PBA membrane can be loaded with up to 500% of the 500 mole percent electrolyte can be loaded, and this conductivity can be improved based upon the loading of phosphoric acid. And this membrane is found to have lower methanol crossover. So as a result, it can be used in a direct methanol fuel cell also. And the mechanical strength of this membrane is also much higher than the Nafion based membranes. The third component that we have to study is the bipolar plates. Basically, these bipolar plates they are used as electrical connection between one unit cell to another unit cell, and the most commonly used material is graphite actually, because it is resistant to corrosion, it has low bulk resistivity, low specific density and all that compared to metal, and low contact and it offers low contact resistance and all. However, there are some problems with that in terms of it needs to be, the flow field needs to be formed in these kind of plates so that gas can be distributed uniformly across the electrode. So to form a flow field in graphite, which is a brittle material actually, so that becomes what is called grooving, becomes very difficult, or it is an expensive process. So the other materials that you can think of is expanded graphite or a slightly softer material, and metallic bipolar plates. Metal itself can act as a bipolar plate. So I've just shown you a different kind of patterns that are possible. You can have a serpentine flow where gas flows from one channel to another, or you can have a parallel flow channel where it goes from it just has a straight passage, or you can have what is known as an interdigitated method where it flows across the electrode. Such kind of designs need to be formed in the graphite plate actually. So as a result, it is high cost, difficult to machine, and brittle. So what are you look at material which can have high electronic conductivity, low corrosion, chemical stability and all that. So and you can come up with what are all the other polymer, you can come up with polymeric composite materials, or you can have metallic plates, or you can have this graphoil, which is a graphite powder exfoliated and then compressed into form a plate actually. If you look at the metallic plate actually, you can have noble metal based plates actually, or noble metal coated plates, which is non-corrosive and can be manufactured as thin plates. However, these will become expensive. So you look at other metals, stainless steel, titanium, all these things we can use. But however, these are prone to corrosion in the PEMFC environment. So you have to form a and they form an oxide layer, electrically resistant oxide layer. As a result, they are no longer useful actually. So what you can do is you can do coating. You can use various methods like electrolysis plating, chemical vapor deposition, or sputter deposition. You can use many methods to form coating which are stable in the fuel cell environment. If you look at the what is the advantage actually, so there are pros and cons for each one of these actually. Graphite, of course, offers is immune to corrosion and good conductivity, moldable, everything. Whereas the cons is it is heavy, thicker parts need to be formed. It's more expensive. And you can also have conducting plastics. Basically they are carbon filled plastics, which can be easily injection molded, so cost reduces. However, because of the plastic present, it is low in conductivity. Apart from that, you can have coated metals, which can be very thin, lightweight stampable sheets can be formed. And however, the con is the non-adherent coating that is there. So what are the coating techniques that you can use? Basically, a sputtering process or nitridation. We can do non-noble metal coating, or most of the times you will find a nitride or a carbide coating. And what is the advantage is that if you look at this figure, you can see that a treated metal curve is produces much higher power compared to graphite, and it is also thin, and the gas utilization also is higher in case of these kind of plates. So these are some of the exfoliated graphite plates that have been made in our center. We have a technology for that, and we use these. These are molded plates actually. So we do not. They are graphite, but because it's an exfoliated method and the processing is different. As a result, we get what is like a stamped plate. So your flow field design is already formed, so we can use them directly in the fuel cell. So now we have seen the materials. Now we have to look at the component, how to form an MEA actually. So if you look at the electrode structure, you have a carbon paper or a carbon cloth on which you have to form a catalyst layer. You can have in between these two, you have what is known as the gas diffusion layer. So this substrate, the gas diffusion layer, and the catalyst and membrane, all these things together form what is known as a membrane electrode assembly. So apart from this, of course, you have bipolar plate and the other cell components like end plate, current collector, etc. So what is this gas diffusion layer? Basically, you need to have a better contact between your carbon cloth or the substrate, the plate, and also the catalyst. If we have, so what we spray a layer called layer of carbon, so that the contact improves and also provides a path for distribution of the gas properly. And this layer can be made hydrophobic or hydrophilic to help your water management. So that is the reason why this gas diffusion pathway is given. So you need to have a good pathway for distribution of the gas, and also you need to have the same structure has to ensure that the water that is formed in the cathode layer does not flood the system, and it should drain off the water that is formed. So you have to have a proper balance of hydrophobic environment and the hydrophilic environment. So a gas diffusion layer helps in that structure. So once we have formed that, basically what are the various steps involved in forming this? You take a carbon cloth or a carbon paper, you hydrophobize it so that water does not wet it, and then you can do this gas diffusion layer can be coated, and then the next step would be to deposit catalyst layer. So this is called a catalyst coated electrode. So you have to take two such catalyst coated electrode and bond it with the membrane. So that together, all the three together forms the membrane electrode assembly. So this is one of the major part of the fuel cell, or one of the important component of the fuel cell. So such membrane electrode assemblies are piled together along with the current distributor plates and bipolar plates, this gas distributor plates, to form a stack assembly, basically. Finally, you have a O-ring, current collector, everything, end plate. All these things are tightened and to ensure gas tightness, and you can also use gaskets so that gas does not leak. So to form what is a fuel cell PMFC stack. So basically, it consists of many cells, and they are stacked together to form a multiple cell, because a single cell produces an voltage of only less than 1 volt. So you need to pile up many cells to form the required voltage and the current for your application. So to operate, what are the things that can be modified to operate? You can study the stack under various temperatures, pressure, humidity, load. These things can be there. So, and this performance of these cells are influenced by how much gas you are giving, what kind of a heat management system you have, and what is the water content in the gas stream, whether the membrane is fully humidified, what is the state of humidification. So you can have various parameters that can be monitored, actually, like gas flow level, humidification, stack current and voltage, and how do you measure the individual voltage, stack temperature. All these things, all these parameters need to be monitored while the stack is in operation. So the PMFC technology as such, if you see, so it starts with the material and it goes to these components. Then you study the single cell. Then you make a short stack or a full stack. Then you need to add various other components, what is known as the balance of system components, balance of power components. So these are the air supply. You have to have a method to give the air supply, fuel supply. When the fuel cell is in operation, it produces equal amount of heat also. So you need to have a thermal management system. Fuel cell produces DC power, so you need to have some kind of a power conditioner, whether you want to operate a DC equipment or an AC equipment. And you should also have a control system to control all these things. So all these things put together becomes a fuel cell system. So all these various components have to be integrated. So if you look at the arrangement of the fuel cell, so before the gas is fed into the stack, actually, so you need to have some method of delivery, actually, whether it can be from the cylinder you are going to deliver. So you need to have some kind of a pressure controller, and then mass flow controller, or something that can monitor the flow of gases into the system. So you have control valves or compressors. So if you, from the stack, you need to cool the stack, actually. So there needs to be a separate thermal control system. So the thermal control system includes humidifiers, which can humidify the gas, heat exchangers to remove the heat, and also radiators to remove the heat from the coolant medium, actually. Apart from this, you also need pumps, radiators, various power conditioning system. All these things are required. This figure shows the various things that are required and how they are all connected to each other to run a fuel cell system. So if we let's look at the reactant system. For the hydrogen side, you need some kind of a control valve to control from the cylinder. You have to have a regulatory valve. After that, you should have a mass flow controller, which tells you the amount of gas that you are feeding into the system. And this has to be followed by a humidifier, so that you can maintain the water content in the system. So for the air side, what you can do, you can have various possibilities. You can have low pressure systems like a blower or a compressor, uh, or various kind of compressors are available actually. However, what needs to be seen is what is the power requirement for each one of these actually. Because if you have a very high power device, the power produced by the fuel cell will be consumed by the blower or all these parasitic, all these parasitic equipments will cover the take away the power that you have produced. So as a result, you have to make sure that the requirement is met, and also the power consumption is very less. So you also have to decide on the stoichiometry of the oxygen, how much air that you are going to give. So what kind of flow rate that is required by required for your cell. It depends on the number of cell, the current, everything. All these things are there. So um, I keep saying that to maintain the membrane hydration, you need to have a humidification method actually, because the performance of the stack is dependent on the conductivity of the membrane. So what do? You have to do humidify the gases or pass the gas through some kind of a water column to get the required humidity. So this can be done by two methods, an external humidification or an internal humidification. An external humidification is where you condition the gases before you send it to the cell, and internal humidification where somehow you ensure that the product water is utilized, or you modify the membrane such that they retain the water. These are the things that are possible. Conventional humidification can be a bubble humidifier where the gas just simply passes through a column of water. Okay, or you can have an enthalpy, which uses enthalpy wheel humidifier, which which takes away the water from the product water and supplies it back to the system actually. Or you can have some kind of an evaporator system where through which the gas passes, water evaporation system through which the gas passes, so that humidification is available. Or you can also have some kind of steam injection method, so that you can inject the required amount of water before it passes into the cell. Each one has their own advantage and disadvantage. While one of them adds weight to the cell, one of them it does not give enough humidification. Various pros and cons are there. One adds to the parasitic power. The other, if you are using a membrane-based humidifier, such membranes you have to make. They are not commercially available, or excess water is sent into the cell. All these things are possible. A method has to be devised to ensure that the proper amount of humidity is sent into the cell. So one of the method of humidification is known as the membrane humidification method, where you have a hydrophilic membrane and the dry gas passes on the one side and water passes on the other side. So while the gas moves across this hydrophilic membrane, it picks up the water from the membrane, and thus humidification is achieved. So you can use Nafion itself, which is a hydrophilic membrane, or you can look at various low-cost alternatives. We had developed a humidifier based on polyvinyl alcohol. However, as this material is soluble in water, you have to ensure that the solubility is reduced by various processing techniques. And we had also added, and because the strength is less, we had also added silica and coated it with glass support on a support material. And then we had studied the characteristics of a humidifier, one such membrane humidifier that we had found. And we found that for a given amount of gas, these humidifiers work well, and it depends on the performance of these membranes, depend on the temperature of the water that is present. So if you want to achieve a higher humidification level, your water temperature has to be higher. Like in this curve, 40 degree shows a better performance. So, and then we also saw whether how flow rate influences the humidity. So we carried out experiments with a constant flow rate of 1.2 LPM with various temperatures, as previously predicted. Here also, with the increase in the temperature, the humidity level increases, and for a given flow rate. So a humidifier is quantified for the given flow rate of gas actually. So if you see up to 50 or 100 LPM, the given humidifier works. But if you keep on increasing the flow rate, the humidity level comes down. So, and then you can also have, like I said, silica is a hygroscopic material. If you add, if you can increase the amount of silica, the performance increases. However, when you add excess amount, the stability of the membrane decreases. So up to 50% we could test, and we found that it was also, I mean, good with higher amount of silica. Based on this, we had made a 20 membrane assembly actually for hydrogen side humidification. We also made a 15 membrane assembly for air humidification. So these humidifiers can be based on the volume of gas. You can design your humidifier based on the size of the membrane, size of the cell, area of the membrane. Everything you can adjust to get the required humidity level. And these humidifiers were also tested with respect to temperature, with respect to the flow rate of the gas. We also tested them with exhaust gas. Exhaust gas is, like I said, is having high humidity. So whether they are good enough to capture back the water and give it to the inlet. So then we tested about the power obtained with the various humidifiers, and found that these were comparable with respect to the external bubble humidifier. And however, you have to design according to the cell you want. Okay. So apart from this, you can also have a gas-to-gas humidifier, where you can the type of membrane here used is a porous membrane, so you have to use the same gas. Okay, like oxygen exhaust can be, air exhaust can be used for cathode humidification. So this is very useful in case of an air-cooled stack where you don't carry an extra water actually. So what we had used is a expanded PTFE, which is a porous membrane, and you can pass water or dry gas on one side. I mean, dry gas or dry gas which needs to be humidified on one side, and the humid gas or the water on the other side. So when the moving dry gas picks up the moisture from the exhaust of the fuel cell stack, and it gets humidified. So we had developed a humidifier. These are some of the characteristics of the porous membrane that we use, where it had a pore size of 0.3 microns and the thickness was only 20-25 micron. And these membranes are used extensively in water filtration, and also they are not very expensive. So we could develop a humidifier, and we tested its properties, and we also integrated with a single cell, and found that the performance does not decrease. So you can reduce the fuel cell stack weight and volume by using these kind of membrane humidifiers. So then we scaled it up, and we even connected it to a fuel cell stack. What you see is a stack, and the one behind is a humidifier. So we can build such kind of devices and use it actually. So the next material that you require is a thermal management system. Humidifiers, of course, are one part of the thermal management system. The next is a heat exchanger. So why is it important? See, what happens is when, like I said, when you operate a stack, equal amount of power and heat are generated. So if you want to run the fuel cell stack in a closed loop system with a constant amount of water, then the temperature of the water will keep increasing, and finally you won't be able to utilize it. So you need to have some kind of a method by which you can remove this heat. Because you are operating at a low temperature, let's say if you are operating at 50 degree or so, what happens is that the delta T, the inlet water itself is above 30-35, and the outlet water is 50. To remove that small temperature delta T, it becomes very difficult. You need a set of radiators, powerful radiator, which add to the parasitic power actually. So if you have a method by which you can increase this delta T, either you can operate, if you are using a high temperature fuel cell kind of a thing, then you can increase the delta T and your coolant can become more efficient. So this figure here shows that as you increase the delta T, the inlet outlet temperature difference, actually, the current density improves actually. So what are the parameters on which this heat rejected is dependent on? It is dependent on the average voltage of the stack. If you operate the stack at low voltage, higher heat is produced. So so you have to choose an optimum voltage. Normally it is 0.6 or 0.7 volts for operation of a stack. It also depends on the number of cells, current drawn, and also whether you are using what kind of heat exchanger you have used to remove the heat from the stack. So if you look at this picture, it shows how the typical this thing is. What can you do with the heat? Reject heat. You can use it for humidification of your gases, inlet, hydrogen and air, and then it goes to the water reservoir. Then you can go to the heat exchanger, which removes the water, which removes the heat, and then so that it can be recirculated back to the stack. This is for a closed loop system. So if you look at this figure, we can see that net power produced, it's just an example where in a stack which produces 2.3 kilowatt of power, and the heat is also equal amount, about 2.5 kilowatt. What is utilized by the humidification bottles is 0.7 kilowatt. So this 1.8 kilowatt of heat energy needs to be removed. So you have to use an efficient heat exchanger to remove this thing. So the next and the important component is control system. Basically, you need to have some kind of a if you want to use an unmanned or a vehicle application of fuel cell. So the amount of gases that should be fed should be equal to should be as much as the power that is generated. You don't want to feed excess gas when the power is very less. So some kind of a feedback system is required actually. So such kind of controllers are required. You use PA controllers, and some kind of control strategy is required, and on what are all the parameters that will be displayed. What inlet pressures, all these things need to be monitored, and should be displayed actually, so that you can take proper action actually. So apart from this, what you require is a power conditioner. Basically, whether you are going to operate a DC, your fuel cell produces DC power, at what voltage your stack is producing, what is the operating voltage for your appliances. So based on that, you need either a DC to DC converter, or if you use inverters, you need to find suitable inverters. These need to be designed, and you need to find suitable power conditioners for your operation. So other than that, you can do other R&D components can be, cost reduction, weight reduction, what you can do instead of bolts, whether you can do some kind of strapping technology, or you can do, how can you prepare a low cost membrane? You can use the expanded PTFE that I showed you is a porous material. So what you can do is you can infiltrate these kind of porous material with your perfluorosulfonic acid kind of material, and to ensure that the amount of perfluorosulfonic acid material that is used to form the membrane is low. As a result, you achieve some kind of a cost benefit actually. So this kind of membrane we had formed, and we had even made a 1 kilowatt fuel cell stack with this. So most of our experiments have led to the development of various generations of 5 or 6 kilowatt. Our maximum power that stack that we have developed is about 10 kilowatt single unit, and these are the pictures of various fuel cell stacks that we have developed and demonstrated. Apart from this, we have also done some demonstrations in transportation. Although our stack is not very suitable for transportation application, as we use graphite based plate, but we wanted to see the range extension that we can get with fuel cells. So we had operated a Reva vehicle and also a Bijli platform, Mahindra vehicle, three-wheeler auto, and we had carried out field trials, and we had logged about 2,500 kilometers, and we had studied the characteristics of various components in this. So I just want to give some capability on the high temperature PM studies that we have carried out. Like I said, it gives you higher tolerance to impurities, and you can get some higher heat removal. You can have better water management because you are not humidifying the gases, and so you have decreased water flooding and all. And because of higher temperature, you can have some higher activity, all these things. So we had procured some commercial membranes, and we had built various stacks actually. So about a 600 watt stack we had built, a 1 kilowatt stack also we had built, studied the characteristics of these kind of cells, and also found that we can do a better cogeneration of heat and power with these stacks by getting heat through thermoelectric coolers we had used, so that we can get back the power actually. So all these things we had done, and one of the main things that finally we have to see is the what is we always have to have a target property. We are always looking at USDOE for our target. What should be the stack catalyst? What should be the platinum loading if you want to achieve, and the power. This particular figure is for an 80 kilowatt PEM stack, where they have said that the target for 2020 is about 0.125 milligram of platinum per centimeter square, and you should operate the stack at 94. Although we have not yet come to reach that kind of temperature in this thing, but this gives you a guideline as to where you should be headed for our target stack performance. And it also gives you about operating accessories or parameters that we need to find actually. So some of them are readily available, some of them need to be developed actually, like this anode circulation, pulse ejector and all for your stack, because you need to give some excess gas, you need to recapture the gas and recirculate it. So some kind of mechanism is required for all these things. And so we look at all these, we keep all these target properties in our mind while we are developing our PMFC system. So in conclusion, I'll just like to say that research components may be materials, if most of the papers will be on material, and however, this other BOP components, all these things put together only can make a fuel cell system which is complete and which can be utilized in all our vehicle or transportation applications. Thank you.
Thank you, madam. Participants, you can unmute yourself and ask any questions.
If you have any question, you just ask.
Hello, ma'am. Good afternoon.
Yeah, good afternoon.
Ma'am, I'm Dr. Kumar Gaurav from UPS Dehradun.
Yeah.
I just want to know how the size of fuel cell affects over its performance. Like to achieve certain voltage or current, we go for fuel stack arrangement. So
no, I'm sorry. Can you please repeat?
How the size of the fuel cell affects over its performance, ma'am? Suppose if I go for a large.
Yeah, see, when the size of the stack becomes very large, or the area of the electrode becomes two way the size can be there. Either you can make the area of the electrode very large, okay. Then what will happen is you won't have proper distribution of the gas. That is what determines the performance of the stack. If it is the length of the stack actually, okay, number of cells that you have piled up to form the length of the stack. Again, what determines is the how you are able to feed all the cells gas. That's all. Okay. So that only will influence if you are able to feed, but irrespective of the length, if you are able to feed the gas properly to each and every cell, then performance will remain constant. However, what happens is when you have if you imagine a pipe with various outlets, unless all the cells, all the outlets have equal amount of gas that is required, and also further also the cell also should not be blocked anywhere actually. Okay, so only then your performance will be constant, or you will have cell to cell variation, all those problems coming into this thing. So how well you are able to feed the gas only determines your performance.
Okay, thank you, ma'am.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. I can. Dr. Piyush Kumar.
Yes, ma'am. Actually, is any criteria, selection criteria is there to select the bipolar plate flow pattern?
The criteria is only, see, what you have to do is you first you design it, and then you have to do velocity profile and the pressure profile and all. You have to ensure that the pressure drop, velocity, all those things, how it varies within the plate, you have to study. So those are the, you have to do modeling for that. So once you design the plate, you have to do modeling to see whether how it performs. Then only you can design your bipolar plate.
Okay, thank you.
Somebody has raised a hand. Please introduce yourself. Please introduce yourself and then ask. Somebody has raised your hand. Any query? Participant? Is there any query? I think it's a post lunch session. So people are okay.
That is always there, sir. And it
After
went for
lunch,
quite a long time. So,
yeah.
I am Dr. S.P. Singh,
Yeah.
calling from MBM Engineering College, Jodhpur, Rajasthan.
yes, sir.
Why it is called bipolar plate?
See, on one side you have oxygen, on the other side you have hydrogen, actually. So when you pile up the cells, so the same plates acts as positive plate and the negative plate. That is the reason it becomes bipolar.
Okay. On one side it works as a cathode for one
Yes.
cell, for other cell
It's
it
an
works as
anode.
a node.
Yeah. Yeah.
So my other question is that you have humidified the oxygen as well as hydrogen.
Yeah.
So basically that humidification is in terms of water vapor, not water.
Yes.
Okay. So when it reaches to the MEA, so
Yes.
there it condenses or it is in form of water vapor only.
It is in form of water vapor only. It has to ensure that, see, what happens is when the protons move across the membrane.
Excuse me. Basically, we are humidifying for having the more conductivity of that membrane, na?
Yes, yes. So what happens is when proton moves across the membrane, it moves as a H3O plus or it moves as a hydronium ion actually. So that is the reason why you require that water. So that is how the membrane gets humidified.
Thank you.
Any other question from the audience? Any query from the audience? Okay. I think if you have any query, you can drop a mail to madam. Thank you,
sure.
madam. Thank you, madam. Thank you for your very useful presentation. In fact, I also enjoyed.
Thanks a lot, sir.
Presentation.
Thank you, sir.
More information, more
yes,
slow and steady, of course. Thank you very much
Thank
for
you,
your wonderful presentation. Participants can ask questions if they have anything. They can send a mail to madam. Once again, I thank you, madam. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, sir. Thank you.
Okay. Okay. Thank you. Participants, of course, they can join by 3:30 for the next presentation by Dr. Vasu Golangi, General Manager, Fuel Cell Research Center, Hyderabad. So we'll start the session at 3:25.
Okay, thank you. Thanks a lot. Bye.
Okay, thank you. Bye.